Hello, people. Welcome to this breakout session. I'm super excited to be speaking with my good friend Don Bora about freelancing and getting into from a freelance mindset to a founder mindset. Just want to make sure that y'all know we have a couple of reminders. One, definitely use the chat. We're going to be reading through the questions that y'all put in the chat and going live there. So if you have any questions throughout the session, please definitely drop it in there. And after the session, we're going to have a feedback form. So please give us that feedback because it helps us improve all of our operations for y'all. Hope y'all love my background. Spent a lot of time preparing that, and I'm super excited to welcome Don Bora. Don is a serial entrepreneur, a professional software developer from Chicago. He started 9 companies, 2 of which he sold. Don is the co-founder of 8-Bit Studios, a leading web and mobile application firm in Chicago. And 8-Bit blends UX, design, and software development collaboratively to deliver digital products to customers. In addition to 8-Bit and the work Don does there, he mentors young entrepreneurs and engineers alike. So I couldn't think of a better person to have a conversation about freelancing and entrepreneurship as a technologist than Don. He's an outspoken advocate for women and girls in tech and definitely a mentor to me. So please give a round of applause or some love in the chat for Don Bora from 8-Bit.
Thanks, man. That was so nice. What a good intro.
Can you hear me? How are you?
I can hear you. I can. I'm doing all right. I love your background. I got my boring little background here, but I'll do a little reveal. This is fake. This is a fake brick right here. So now everybody can be disillusioned and understand the fakeness of my background. Are you okay, Cam? You look like. Can you hear me? Uh-oh. Oh no.
So
can other people hear me?
Much. Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't hear him real quick. Oh, y'all can hear both of us. Interesting.
Gosh. The minute I got thrown up on stage, something weird happened. All right, can everybody hear me now? Can you hear me now, Cam? Can you hear me now? Oh, this is not.
Oh. It's all good, Don. They can hear you, so.
Okay, cool. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
The minute they threw me up on stage, all my settings went haywire. So apologize.
Hey, it's all good. It's all good. I was like, if they can hear you, that's great because I don't need to hear you.
I was just revealing that your dope background, my background that's a fake brick wall back there. So.
Well, you know what the thing is you are a seasoned entrepreneur. You had 9 companies. You don't need a nice background. People are just gonna believe what you say. You know, like I have to make
you
sure
gotta bring. You got to bring something. You got to bring some professionalism, right?
Well, just for context, y'all. So I am the career liaison for CodePath, and I spent a great amount of time in my role in Atlanta supporting engineers at the early stages of their career. It's like something that is deeply passionate, that I'm deeply passionate about. And I've been passionate about for years. And part of the reason why is because of people like Don, who have spent their years as engineers figuring out pathways for younger entrepreneurial engineers and folks who are interested in tech to get the knowledge that they need to develop their career pathways. So Don, I was curious if you could just give a brief journey into your life as a technologist, because it spans several years, and maybe talk about what's motivated you to mentor younger engineers, the programs you've started to help engineers at the early stages, just to kind of level set so folks know how lit you are. And then we'll talk a lot more about 8-Bit Studios and the entrepreneurial side of what your work is.
Yeah, is lit how we say old now? Is that the
lit is
for it?
well, see, I'm old saying lit now. That's how.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was lucky enough to graduate right at the right time with the right degree. So I went to school for computer science, and I graduated college in 1991. And then 4 years later, the first internet browser came out. But when I was in college, we were part of the university system that had access to what was before the internet called DARPANET, and I was part of the. There was like it was a linked set of colleges and universities that were adjacent to military institutions. And so I was right outside of White Sands Missile Range. And so, like, we had the Research Institute, we had the internet in like 1990, 89, 90, 91. So I was very, very, very fortunate to have graduated then, just as graphic user interfaces were becoming a thing, just as operating systems were becoming variant outside of like what mainframe was. Green screens were on their way out as I graduated. So I can't even begin to say how lucky I was. Um, I got my first job out of college. They tried to put me in management, and I'm like, you guys are nuts. I'm 23 years old. I can't even manage myself. So I ended up leaving that company and going to an AI research lab. And that role right there, that role switch, going from like a corporate. My first job was at Motorola, going from a huge corporation to a small research lab, albeit at a prestigious university, really set my path and ultimately allowed me to meet people that wanted to do something on their own, and I just kind of happened to be there when that happened too. So I like my mindset back then wasn't naturally entrepreneurial. It was cocky. It was yeah, I can code, so let's do this. Like, I'll build it. And it took me years to understand like the nexus of like business and being able to build software was a magic combination. So um, it's just I was real super lucky, man, and I've tried to embrace that luck and to pay it forward as often as they can to make sure luck surrounds other people too.
That's awesome. Can you talk a little bit about some of the ways that you've worked with like early engineers or like early career professionals since having that long background in the work you've done?
Yeah, so about 12 years ago, there was a boot camp scene that started up in Chicago, and I quickly latched onto that scene, if only because I owned my own company and I saw that as a pathway for early stage founders to get educated. And I was super excited about that. And then I realized, oh, wow, this is the way to train developers, because what I would later come to understand, most of what we do on a daily basis, you don't need a CS degree to do. We are figuring out how to do things algorithmically, and we're also putting together pieces of software to make it all work. If you're trying to create something that's been created before, you're taking a risk in creating a problem, right? So you go out to the open source community, you go out into GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever, and try to find something that somebody else has written before. When I got involved in boot camps, I started to see an opportunity for myself to really get involved mentoring, and just being a sounding board for people that were interested in tech, that were interested in starting companies. I've since amended my mission statement, by the way. I'm a passionate advocate for women and people of color in tech. And I make sure to prioritize those people above the me's of the world, because I think the me's of the world we have a lot of advantages already. Um, so so once I put that mission kind of out there, it became super easy to say yes to opportunities, and then not say no to people, but find other people that could help them. And that's kind of the watchword that I live by. If I can't help you, I know someone who can.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what motivates me to do it. I find it super rewarding.
Mhm.
And I guess, so unsolicited advice to anybody out there. Once you get enough under you, once you feel like you can be of service to somebody, and I guarantee no matter where you are in your life, you can be of service to somebody, it is so rewarding to do it. I highly recommend doing it.
I completely agree. And just a little bit more added context. I met Don as I was studying computer science in college. So like most of y'all, I was a CS degree holder in waiting, right? So I was waiting to graduate, studying computer science. And I took a semester off school to do a coding boot camp, one of the ones he was just mentioning. And so it was really fascinating going from like a computer science degree track of learning in school to a boot camp. And I'm sure some folks might be curious about like, hey, you know, like after school, maybe you've heard of like going and doing boot camps and things like that. Don is definitely a expert person to ask questions about that learning style too. But one of the things that came up for me during that process was recognizing that as an engineer, you kind of have to learn by doing, right? Like there's so much that you can do within like a classroom context, but so much more of what you're able to accomplish as an engineer comes from like the projects you're building or the things you're doing to learn those new frameworks and put your hands into the code. And so, Don, I know that 8-bit as a studio, you know, is an interesting type of business that most junior engineers might not have been familiar with, right? It's because I think often in college we're taught to think about looking for a long career at like a large tech company. Can you just kind of talk about like what a studio is and you know what career pathways into like working at a place like 8-bit might look like for someone who's a college student?
Yeah, and first I want to shout out to Cameron real quick because you embrace and embody that the mentor spirit as well, and I know you do a ton of it too. So right back at you, man.
Thanks, man.
It's lovely work. So a studio is, for those who don't know, you know, we would consider ourselves a boutique agency or boutique studio. So what that means is that we create custom software for our clients, and we're about, you know, at our best, we're about 40 people. We're shrinking rapidly now and kind of pivoting our company a little bit. But I would say, you know, your studios or agencies are in our ecosystem is we're about anywhere from 20 people to 160 people doing service work for smaller or mid-sized companies. And so, you know, these are a lot of companies that you may have never heard of before. Like most of our client roster, no one's ever heard of before. Every time somebody says, "Oh, what's an example of something you've done?" I have to say, "Well, how familiar are you with Chicago?" Because like the landscape in Chicago is where we begin, and we have very few national brands on, you know, as like badges on our site because there's a lot of work, regional and local work that we can do. So so our model is to do everything that we know how to do in-house. So we have user experience. We were founded by user experience design and tech. I'm one of the co-founders. And our ethos has always been do the work that we know how to do. So if we don't know how to do it, it's not part of our core service offering. We partner with companies who can do it, and that's the studio model, right? So we don't do video. We have partners that do video. We don't do animation. We have Emmy-nominated animation studios and animators and illustrators that we work with. We do try to find real top-tier talent we work with. But yeah, studio is basically at its core like what we do at a core, and then any kind of external services, we find partners and we work with
Yeah.
those partners.
And I think it's interesting because like the studio model is such an interesting place to work in as an engineer because you're working with a diverse set of clients, right? Like every project can look very different. And maybe like as an engineer on working at a studio, you might have experience, you might gain experience working on a number of different projects. And in a lot of ways, I think is really akin to people who freelance, right? People who are like, hey, I am a full stack developer and I'm marketing my services as a full stack developer to potential clients for hire. How do you find freelancing how do you feel like freelancing can be a way for students to leverage their skills post graduation to develop more experience in the industry?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The people that we've had come through APIS, so we've been around for 16 years. So hundreds of people have come and gone through our team door, right? So the people who work with us, and the people who have stayed with us are of that mindset. Like, I want to work on different projects, and I want you to bring me work. And the average span of an 8-bitter is about 8 years, 8 years, which is almost unheard of in our industry, right? But to answer your question, and I think I might have forgotten your question.
Freelancing.
Can you ask it again? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I
So
wanted to
like,
address what you said,
yeah.
so
So
my bad.
So the work that you do at a studio, working on different types of projects, managing kind of those relationships and whatnot, is kind of like a grown-up model of like what it's
Yeah.
like being a freelancer. And so I was curious if you could just
Yeah.
shed some insight on like the pathway into freelancing that students might find themselves in post-graduation, and how you think that freelancing could be used as a way to help students develop their experience in the industry.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Thanks. So the landscape of freelancing is kind of uh, there's a lot to it. So you've got, basically, how are you gonna start your business? Are you gonna like bill through your own social security number? Are you gonna get yourself an LLC and bill that way? There's all that minutia, and I think it's pretty easy to figure that stuff out these days. The harder part is the hustle, going and finding clients and hanging out in the right places to go and find those clients. So I know you had somebody on from Y Combinator yesterday, going and finding your local incubators or your local accelerators and hanging out there to find the people who want work done, because those are people that are they're not the people starting companies like that are not going to come to 8-bit because our rates are like anywhere from 195 to 200 an hour. They're going to go to a freelancer whose rates are maybe anywhere from 65 to 125 an hour, depending on, years of service or whatever. So it's the hustle, I think, is most of the game, and building up your portfolio through the hustle. I think that I think we're in an economic downturn still. We're kind of like we're leveling off. And one thing that's true about economic downturns is that's when people start companies. And so, when you've got these, massive amount of tech layoffs in the rearview mirror as you're looking at the landscape of like, where am I going to get a job? If you're looking forward, you've got a lot of people like trying to start companies. I teach early stage entrepreneurship at an accelerator and incubator here in Chicago, and yeah, that class is full. That class is full all the time. It's people starting companies. So, really, when I look for work, and right now I'm entertaining fractional CTO level, like chief technology and chief tech strategy opportunities. I'm really just kind of like networking around the people I know and being pretty targeted about these are people who have decent networks. These are people who know leaders in the community, because that's the position I'm going for. Um, but I'm telling you, if you just want to build stuff for people, going into events saying, yeah, I build software, I build web apps, I build websites, people light up. And it allows you to like refine your elevator pitch in real time, because you're just giving them a tease. Like, I build things. What do you build? I may be going a little too deep there, Cameron. So feel free to
No, you're good.
redirect me.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I started my career in tech as a freelancer, right? It was very interesting to be the person you're talking about who, after graduating from school, not having like a full-time job lined up at a large company, having those experiences, like not doing well on technical interviews, and, transparently the like fear that, oh, maybe I'm not good enough comes up a lot. And that imposter syndrome really hits. But
Same.
working as a freelancer and just saying, hey, I know one thing I could do is build a website. Does anybody need a website? And, starting off with those projects really helped transform my own sense of self and sense of understanding.
Oh,
And
yeah.
from there, it's like, oh, I got some money. You doing this? Wow, that's awesome. And it helps you really kind of understand that pathway can really open up doors for you as just an engineer, right? And one of the things that I think is interesting too is, as someone who starts working in that capacity, right, you have to develop a lot of different sets of skills to do well as a freelancer. And I think oftentimes moving from just like, hey, I'm an engineering student, to, okay, now I'm freelancing, folks have to learn kind of these fundamental business and professional skills. What would you say, like in your experience, both like being a freelancer, doing fractional CTO work, and even running the studio, what have been some of the skills that you feel like you've developed outside of your engineering skills that have made you successful?
Yeah, and real quick about the imposter syndrome stuff. Like, dude, I've used 20 languages professionally in my career, and I've been told no. And I haven't interviewed for a job in 16 years, and I don't think I would do well at it now. But oh my gosh, it was just like, I know I can build it. Just let me build it. It's such a fraught thing. Interviewing is such a fraught thing. So my
Yeah.
heart goes out to anybody interviewing. So what skills I mean, I like to say that I earned my MBA on the streets. Um, as an entrepreneur, and quite frankly, a freelancer. And now that I've run a company for so long, my freelance skills are on point. Um, just you know, proactively sending status reports to my client. I have a couple fractional CTO gigs right now, so proactively sending updates, um, weekly updates, making sure that I'm meeting their expectations all the time. Because if I'm not meeting their expectations, either I have to change or I have to go away. That's kind of the way I look at this engagement, because it's such high stakes as if when you're kind of running the show for another company. Um, Understanding how to, or I guess developing the skill of tech speak to human speak, right? I can make anybody's eyes glaze over in seconds. That's a superpower of mine. I can talk tech, and people around me have seen it happen where they're like, oh, you're in tech, and I just start going at it, and my wife will be like, what just happened? Versus being able to boil it down into lay terms and have everyone kind of understand what you're saying. And that is a skill that will endear you to the non-technical people that are hiring you, either the business people or the product people or the CEOs. And every CEO I've worked with loves that about me, that I can distill it down into something that they can understand. Because all they're hearing is tech, 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 tech. And let me tell you something. When I took one of the CTO jobs that I've got right now, when I got there, she had hired a neighborhood friend's kid to help build her new piece of software. He was too young to know what he was doing, but he had a heart of gold. And so I'm like, well, let's get in there. Let's see if you got it. And what was happening was, and I saw this immediately. We get on a call, and he would very excitedly talk about stuff he had just done, and about half of the words he was using were incorrect. They were just wrong terminology. I knew that, but the CEO didn't know that. The CEO just saw confidence and stuff that she considered over her head, and so she thought he was brilliant. And I finally got on a call with her, and I said, look, he doesn't understand half of what he's saying right now, so we just have to gauge our expectations, and that's a big thing. So kind of going in with, I think communication skills are number one when you're in freelance, number one, because communication skills help you build trust.
Definitely. Yeah, that's, if I could mic drop, I'd mic drop right there. That's a quote. But yeah, the communication side of things is really important. And I think as an engineer, right, you don't often see the parallels between like, hey, I do code all day, to I also have to develop my writing skills. I also have to develop my speaking skills. I also have to develop my critical thinking skills outside of an engineering context. And so I think everything you just said makes a lot of sense. We have a couple questions in the chat that I want to definitely entertain for a second.
Yeah.
And but before we go into that, I want to just ask you, Don, just plain and simple, right? If you were a student and graduating right now, right, as you were many years ago, right, how would you approach maybe entering into like freelancing, or entering into like, hey, I just have learned for 4 years, and I'm in between getting a job, but I'm interested in using my engineering skills. What might be some of the steps you would have taken, I guess now?
As far as freelancing goes,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a great question, because when I graduated, there was like that wasn't a thing.
Mm.
um, like the help wanted ads in what was called the newspapers. There weren't a whole lot out there, and they were all mainframe or like big companies. um, it's such an amazing place right now. I think the most amazing way that the playing field has been leveled a bit more than it was maybe 4 years ago is the fact that, and we're actually seeing it as a company. Um, Companies have gotten very, very, very comfortable with people working not on site, right? And I know there's a little bit of a culture war around return to office, but the fact of the matter is that everyone's a little more comfortable than they used to be. So you can look at that and say, okay, but there's all the nearshore and offshore talent that's going to be recruited. And to that I say, yeah, but you can get a job in San Francisco if you live in Iowa and charge less because you don't have the cost of living that San Francisco has. And you can start building up your portfolio in a way that you couldn't have done beforehand. So for me, this is a magical time, AI notwithstanding. This is a magical time to be able to leverage like remote opportunities and get out of your city or out of your area to try to find gigs there. And there's all kinds of websites and all kinds of like forums and social media platforms that can help you find those people who are looking to get that stuff done.
Yeah, I would say 3 that are helpful: LinkedIn for sure, Reddit, Twitter, even
No kidding,
X,
Reddit.
right?
Yeah.
Networking through like even through GitHub and like finding opportunities by way of looking at issues. I know folks have been talking about open source. Let's say like a college student was trying to petition themselves for like a job at 8-bit, right? And they're like, hey, I'd love to work as a contractor. Maybe, let's assume you had the budget for everyone to get hired, right? How would you want someone to approach you as a founder of a studio to best demonstrate, hey, I might be an entry level talent, but I'm very excited about this opportunity and would love to be working at your org?
You nailed it. You net that right there. And we get this all the time. Um, and it's our policy to answer every email we get that way. And so sometimes we're very, very busy answering all those emails. And we kind of like file them away to look back to when we have opportunities that are available. So yeah, we've got nothing right now. Just I'll put that out there. We have nothing right now. But just that, like, come in with email or reach out on LinkedIn. Say exactly that. Like, just like, hey, I'm a junior, blah blah blah. I'd love to get 5 minutes of your time or whatever, or I'd love to learn more about your company. Um, and if you're looking for, if this is a more general question of like you're going to a company and you want to learn, you legitimately want to know about opportunities there and rise above the fray. Um, Tell them something about their own company. Tell them what you specifically love about that. People love hearing about themselves. And when somebody comes in, I know it's happening. I know the psychology of it, but I can't help but be affected. Like, oh, they know my company. Oh, wow, that's cool. Now, the thing that is the opposite of that was somebody gets on a call with me and hasn't even looked at the website. And they're like, wait, what company is this again? I'm like, oh, yeah, we're not. No, I can't keep going.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that being proactive, reaching out and having those conversations is really key. So one question from Stephen Smith in the chat was, when freelancing as a student, what are some basic legal things that they should be aware of?
Right. So freelancing as a student, I think a couple of things. It's helpful if you have your own LLC. They're extremely easy to get, and you can go to your probably like LegalZoom or go to your local state government website and fill out the forms. I think it's about $400, so for a student it may not be cheap. Um, and once you have that, now you can start billing under that FEIN, that business version of a Social Security number. Um, if you've got multiple clients, the government loves that. If you have one client, the government doesn't love it so much, but if you're not full-time employed somewhere, it's fine. Find a good invoicing, a way to invoice. Honestly, we just had a freelancer that joined us who didn't know how to invoice, and I found that very strange. So we helped them out. We helped them figure it out, but know how to invoice is big. You can get there's like if you just look for free invoicing software, you'll find like freemium versions or low paid. I myself use FreshBooks. That's kind of how we started at Studios before we grew out of it. I still use FreshBooks to maintain my clients. And what's nice about that is then I can just give my accountant a login to the system, and that's all handled. If you are freelancing, you have to make sure that you're taking care of your own unemployment taxes. Read up on that, understand what that is, and you don't have to file quarterly. I file once a year, but it's recommended that you file quarterly. I would talk to an accountant. Talk to an accountant, find someone who knows someone. And I will also say that accountants are always a little weird to deal with. Um, there are fewer and fewer of them around, so the few of them around that are around are very busy. Um, and the first time that you like the tax deadline is coming up and you don't have your stuff together, it's freaky. It took me years to get over that. I don't worry about it anymore. I never file on time anymore, and my accountant handles everything. Um, and that would be true even if I were just like freelancing, like I used to freelance. So I hope that is enough detail for you, Steve. Right, Steve?
Steven, yeah.
Steven.
You went in. I would say outside of FreshBooks, QuickBooks is another great platform for invoicing. Bill.com. I know we got CodePath has a great partnership with Bill.com.
Bill.com. Yeah.
So
Yep.
those types of platforms are really helpful because what Don is trying to get at is, as a freelancer, you're responsible for sending in how are you going to get paid? And so you
Yeah.
have to be responsible for your own systems for managing payment. Most times, some organizations will cover that on their behalf, but when you're freelancing, you want to make sure that you have a means to get paid. And so
Yeah.
knowing how to send an invoice, to Don's point, is the standard way of essentially saying, here's the amount of services I've worked on and are billing for, and getting someone to be able to pay you for those services.
Yeah, and on the detail there, make sure that there's a like a term on the invoice, so pay within 30 days or pay within 15 days. You'll get pushback on that from some companies. They're like, no, we're on a 30-day cycle. Fine, that's fine, but at least you've got something to start a conversation with. First off, second off, make it as easy as possible for them to pay you. That's it. So I have ACH ready to go. I don't want to do credit cards because I don't want anybody to pay those fees. So I do ACH, or they can send me a check. Those are the two easiest ways. Because if you're getting a couple $1,000s for a job, going through something like Zelle or Venmo can be problematic because the bigger numbers will flag them in your system. I had somebody who was trying to pay me through Venmo, and the big number flagged it as fraud on both our accounts, and it got weird.
Yeah, I know you're not. I know you're not doing any fraudulent activities.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, freelancing is actually really interesting because of the fact that you have to work in this capacity, but it's really rewarding, right? Because you get the opportunity to create some of these systems for yourself that can last you very well and help you in the process of developing out of that freelancing space and time to a full-fledged company. What had been some two questions? One for you, Don, is when you think about that, like the early stages of like your freelance systems and what then it turns into for being a bigger company, would you say that freelancing prepares you well for like running your own company? That's the first question.
No. And here's the longer. So real quick, I love freelancing because I love meeting people and I love helping people solve problems. So for me, that is like I get to do that all the time. Whereas when I'm at a company, it just clicks a different speed for me. I don't dislike being at someone else's company, but I find it is limiting for me, and I have a limited lifespan in that
Well,
framework.
I meant more like
Um,
running your own. So like going
no, no, no,
from,
no, no. Yeah, I wanted to address what you said earlier,
okay,
but
go ahead.
the thing about running your own company is once you take on employees, you have a whole slew of issues that almost nothing can prepare you for. Um, Payroll, benefits, cash flow, when money comes in the door and how to get it out, and making sure that you always got enough in the bank account to pay people. So making sure that you've got let's just say you've got a 60-day pay cycle with your people, which is not cool. It's probably going to be 15. And you've got a shorter pay cycle with your clients so that you've got that cash flow there and you can build up money. People quit, you post jobs, there's application processes, those are changing all the time due to a whole slew of things. I mean, last year, I have been a DEI guy for over 2 decades, and there was never a term for it until quite recently. So in the past 2 years, I was like, this is awesome. Like, everyone's speaking my language. And now there's a backlash. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with this backlash. I'm still me. I'm still going to do what I do, but I have to be a little more quiet about it. I don't know. It's super weird. So that whole like hiring people and managing the human resources angle of it is very, very difficult. And I've talked to so many founders and people who run companies who echo this. When you hire HR, it's already too late.
That's funny. So it's different. You're saying there's a difference in like, working for yourself as a freelancer, like you're self-employed and doing it for yourself, than like running a company, having to deal with like building the team and the kind of nuance to that.
Yeah, because now I got to keep so the way I work, my default setting is I have to keep all these people employed. That's the way I look at it. So when we were up to almost 50 people, I was like, that's a lot of families, man. I'm not just taking care of my family. I'm making sure everyone else is taken care of too. It's a big responsibility.
I think you're right. And it's interesting kind of that you like call out that nuance, because, some folks might not really know the difference between like, hey, like, is it that I want to run my own company, or is it that maybe I want to be a freelancer and just kind of work for hire and do some stuff as a contractor or as a consultant in a way.
Well, and real quick, last thing I'll say on this is I'd like to consider myself an empathetic person, and I work at it very hard. And so I'm always kind of like eventually within seconds getting to that empathy point. However, I also like to move very fast. And I also don't care about the details, which is not a great thing for someone who's running a company, because people care about details. And if you're making a move as a founder, as an owner, people want to know those details. If you're affecting somebody else's lives, they want to know the details. And what I found invaluable was surrounding myself with people who also want those details at the leadership level. And they help me figure out how not to, I don't know, be a jerk or screw things up all the time.
Yeah. I think that the details, and there's different there's different types of archetypes of like what it means to be like to run a business, and the types of people you need to support you in those early stages. One person asked a question about like, when it comes to finding and being a CTO, right? Because you're now doing like freelance work in that space. How do you see like the pathway for someone becoming a CTO, and what do you think is required to become one? So curious, like both from your experience, like working with like larger companies who may, or even, middle-sized companies that might need this, but also if you're someone who's starting a new company, you're running a startup and you're like, I need a CTO, what would be some of the qualities that you'd look for out of a CTO, and how do you recommend that folks, especially emerging engineers, enter that pathway?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I've thought about this a lot, and you probably know this, that I've fallen on different sides of this argument when it comes to the CTO role. So fundamentally, CTOs manage the technical strategy of a company and its externally facing products or services. And a CIO tends to be internally focused and less technical. So on the CTO side, it's all about understanding basically how a business runs and how to work in service of that business. So understanding what a profit and loss P&L statement is, understanding budgeting and how to work within that budget, and how to build a team, and how to keep track of what technology is being used, and how to push the envelope. And depending on your industry, how far do you push it and what technologies do you use? And kind of being a little ahead of the curve on, well, this is not a popular technology, and if we're going to build something we want around in 10 years, we probably shouldn't use it, type thinking. So those are kind of all the like ground level details around CTO. As far as like the path to get there, I've got different opinions on this. Normally, founders non-technical founders think they need either a technical co-founder or a CTO to get off the ground. I push back against that all the time. You don't need a full-time CTO or full-time tech founder. What you need is tech expertise, and you can get that by putting together a professional advisory board or an actual board of advisors. But I'm actually in talks with a company right now, and they're looking for a full time. And my position is, you don't have anything right now in existence. So anything I would do would be at max half the time, half, like maybe 20 hours a week. I don't know what I would do at 40 hours except for just eat up your money. And I want you to succeed badly. So let's not do that. Let's not eat up all your money on me. Let's take that money and build a team so they can deliver. Because at, at my career level, I'm not the one going to be in there building the software, most of the software. I can get my hands dirty, but I'm not going to be as up on the latest emerging technologies as probably you all in the audience are. So I would much rather you all build that. And I'm keeping like the very high level strategy in mind. So in my opinion, I think like, you can probably start looking at the CTO position. I think I've seen as early as 5 years under your belt. I'd say between 5 and 10 years, you kind of start like knowing what's going on. But if I'm looking for a CTO for a company, they have to have seen some stuff. They have to have seen like major server outages. They have had to recover some big issue or problem. They've had to build something, not necessarily at scale, but build and launch a couple of things. But if I'm looking for a CTO, I really want to know how they manage the failures. I need some big failures on their resume. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but the fact of the matter is there's always going to be a failure. And the team has got to know how you're going to handle that failure. The company I'm fractional at right now, they had a server outage. Their server ran out of space. They're using out-of-date technology, and I'm helping them re-platform to something else. But we're still on that old platform, and there's nothing we can do about it right now except manage that platform. So, when it ran out of space, I did not panic. I figured out how to get it back on track, and then I wrote a small little script to delete those log files every night so it doesn't happen again. But I've seen this before, so I just I kept my cool, and I told the CEO exactly what was going on, and I told her that I was working with the vendor to figure things out, and he just kept her in lockstep in the loop the whole time, so she could go do her job and be confident that everything was being taken care of.
That
That was
makes
a
a lot of
long
sense.
answer.
No,
Long
that makes
answer.
sense.
Sorry
It
about that.
makes sense. It makes sense that what you're saying is kind of gets back to the idea of like, as a student and as an emerging engineer right now, you're trying to create experience, and finding experience is like the number one thing that you need to grow your career as an engineer. And one of the reasons I wanted Don to have this conversation about freelancing is because, in my opinion, freelancing is a great way to start building some of that experience. You start seeing stuff, like he's saying, right? As you're building projects for yourself, you don't necessarily push the envelope so much as if you're building something for someone else based on what their requirements are, based on what their needs are, identifying how do I go from what this person has in their head as a vision for a platform and help them deliver it. And the skills that come from that are typically professional skills, business facing skills, communication skills that allow for you to grow your career in really significant ways on the non-technical side. But on a technical front, you're building these really interesting projects that are vary because each person you talk to about a project wants something different. And in that, you're gaining this experience, seeing a lot of different things that eventually help you have a mental model, kind of to go back to what Nathan was saying earlier today about the future. Like, hey, what could go wrong in the system like this, right? I've seen something like this in an old project or in a different client that I worked with, and those experiences, I think, help you advise people about their technology choices. And that advising of people on their technology choices, I think, to Don's point, is what people want out of a CTO, someone who can think through the strategy and help them identify what are maybe points of failure here. And I would also say that those things trickle down, right? As a senior engineer, even you'd want to still kind of develop those same types of skill sets to be able to, at every step of your career, be able to talk more about, hey, if we go with this particular architectural choice, what might be some of the consequences in doing this? What might be other alternatives? And developing that type of communication is one of the core things that can help you level up your career.
Yeah, and to build on that, Cameron, you know, the years in service allow you to get an understanding, a mature understanding of what is possible and what is costly, right? And so, like 5 to 10 years in, you're going to be like, okay, there's a cheaper way to do this, or okay, you know, we can do this a little fancier. We can add this XYZ over here, and it will allow you to say that's going to cost more than you've got. Um, and and when you get to the CTO level, it's about, does the business really need that, and what are the goals that are driving that, and are there any sales or marketing targets that we have to know about when we go into building. And to put a bow on that, Cameron, I'm working with an engineer I'm not a JavaScript guy. In fact, I hate JavaScript, and everyone who knows me knows that. But we're in JavaScript on this platform, and I can't deny its popularity and its performance in some instances. And you know what we're doing is kind of complicated, and I had this way in my head of like how the database was going to be grown, and my developer came to me and said, "Hey, I'd like to do this." And the minute he said the words, I was like, "Oh, I forgot that was the thing. That's perfect. Yep, do it." And then sometimes he'll come to me and say, "Hey, I'd like to do this," and I'm like, "You know what? I know what you're saying, and it's a good idea, but we have to hold off on that because it's not." Budget wise, it's not the right move right now. I think we'll take on that tech debt for a little while longer, and we'll push the threshold of when it's like we really shouldn't wait any longer. We're gonna push that threshold to get other things done first. So it's just kind of having enough years under your belt to be able to defend those positions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The years in the game building projects helps you in the communication of what can you do and what maybe is possible. But one point to also put a bow on the bow you put on that is this is why it's super exciting to be a junior engineer right now, even considering this, because you have an opportunity to look into more of the technologies that are going to be the trend in 5 years and say, well, hey, I've been looking at this for 5 years, right? So now I can tell you more about whether it's like, hey, you know, a lot of engineers are talking about building an AI or building on top of the LLMs that exist now and the different technologies in that space. But imagine 5 years from now, right? Like if you have that expertise of I've been building projects here, maybe have worked on small things for a little couple clients. You become that person that people can say, oh wow, like your experience gives more context to decisions that we might have as an organization later. One other question, Don, is to pivot us back to some student questions.
Yeah, yeah.
David in the chat asked, he's someone who's working as a part-time solutions architect. Shout outs to you, get in the bag. He said he's had trouble managing client expectations and having them constantly change requirements. It's a bit difficult communicating past that technical gap. Any tips that you might give to someone like David?
Yeah, I would say, and something just happened to the screen, so I want to make sure people can hear me still. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can say you. They're just showing the
Okay, cool.
question.
Yeah, yeah. Documentation. Document and communicate. And you want to what you're trying, and you're working a very fine line here, and your position is it's unenviable, because it happens all the time, and you're not trying to litigate the past. You're trying to make sure people understand how we got here, and this is a communication issue 100%. It's funny. I became a certified coach a few years ago, and that's where I see my coaching skills come to life when there's that kind of a fundamental either misunderstanding about what was communicated or a continuous change in what needs to be done. So documentation, make sure the timeline and the roadmap is well understood, make sure like everybody on the team, including the product people, understand what's being built and when it's being built, and just over and over and over again. That's the only way to address that problem. Sorry, I don't have an easy one for that, but
Yeah,
yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one for sure.
managing client expectations is the work that helps you grow as a professional, though. And so, to Don's point, I think documentation is like one of the things that allows for you to in advance kind of communicate, here's what we're going to do, here's the plan, and get that feedback along the way. Whereas if you don't have a clear documentation process, it's easy for clients to kind of get lost in the process of, especially when you're building something big and technical, right? Like it's like very easy for people to get lost. And as a solutions architect, your job is to kind of convey that big picture understanding of this big platform that we're building. And so
And you know
it's
what's amazing? You know what's amazing today that you can do that you couldn't do a year ago? Like you can have all the notes of everything and maybe even a Jira board or Trello of what you were doing. Now you can pop that in a chat GPT and say, hey, show me the history of this. What happened? And it could actually like pull together a decent narrative that would save you probably a good 15, 20 minutes doing.
yeah, it's
That's
true.
magic. That's magic, man.
I think the use of AI in like project management is like really kind of a great space.
Yeah.
And like learning how to leverage those tools, to your point, Don, could be super worthwhile for students for sure. So I think we have just a little bit more time for maybe a couple more questions, because we're right at the end of our session here. Don, I do want to thank you for your time and all your insight as always. Um, so I guess like one question is, when students are looking maybe at like going into freelancing and trying to find like that those resources around creating their freelance opportunity, so like things like an accountant or things like the invoicing software, um, where do you feel like they can go to find those resources, and hopefully not in a costly way?
So, two things, of course, the internet and and searching and figure and finding like what the top 10 lists or that sort of thing, or QuickBooks alternatives or that the I guess the thing that everyone kind of knows about. The thing I think is under leveraged a lot is peer communities. Find your peer groups and get in there. I have a group of founders that I rely on. We have friend DAs, that's like the don't talk about stuff, I won't talk about your stuff type of thing. Um, and it's huge. It's sometimes it's founder therapy. It's what's going on in your world, what can I help with? Here's what's going on in my world. So I peer groups is huge because there's always going to be a trend that someone else notices that you haven't seen yet. Always, 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 always. And having a peer group is like, find a Slack channel. There's Slack groups out there galore. Maybe find something local to your area. Maybe an affinity group, or a language specific group. Like if you're a Node developer, like find the Node freelancers. That finding your community, I think is top of the list.
Yeah, and I think for someone starting out, right, like a lot of the places that you can go to just meet people are like events, and Eventbrite and platforms like Luma are great platforms. So just kind of source out like different events happening in your technology ecosystem. And attending events that are not events for engineers is sometimes the best places to go, because when you go to a place that's like, oh, there's an accountants meetup on Eventbrite. I'm not an accountant, but it was free. So let me go and just network with some of the people. One, you might meet a great accountant, but then two, if you go to an accountant's meetup and say, hey, I'm a student at so and so school, but I build websites, right? That might be how you land that first client, and start your freelancing process, right? It's going to those
100%.
spaces where
Yep.
you're bringing oranges to the farmer's market full of apples and saying, hey, I bring web development to a room full of accountants, and walk away with someone who says, oh, I need some help with that, and develop those relationships that way. I found that going to events has been really tremendously helpful in building out that network like that.
I'm gonna borrow that orange and apple metaphor. That was
I always
great.
say it.
That
It's
was
true.
great.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Like being an engineer, and you go to a lot of events often just for engineers. And it's like, well, that's like me as a farmer of apples going to a farmer's convention with people who sell apples. It's gonna be very hard for my apples to like shine here, like blue ribbon state fair contest kind of thing. But if I go to a place where they've never seen an apple, right, and they only see bananas every day, right, suddenly now I become special, right? And so I think that that mindset and finding events that are outside of the industry could be really tremendously helpful for you as you're building out your career, looking for new opportunities, looking for people who might need help, and working with them there. Well, Don, thank you so much. I think we're right at time, so I just want to make another just round of applause for you. Can y'all give my man Don some love in the chat? I really appreciate your time today. As always, just insightful and just super warm and encouraging. And so I thank you for giving of yourself always and being a mentor to so many folks. We are, I just want to make one more shameless plug for y'all to fill out our quick survey. Your opinions matter very much to us and help us improve this opportunity every time we host. And with that, I will allow you to go, Don. Thank you so much. And we're going to play a short video from our host, Bobby D. And I hope to see y'all at a future session. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you so much, Cameron.
No
Thank you
problem,
so much.
Don.
It was great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in this session. I got some information before you leave. It says, please take a moment to complete a brief survey to share your feedback. Remember how valuable feedback is. I'm trying to come back 3 years in a row, and it's all based on feedback, right? To see what comes up next, I want you to head back to the main stage and check out the schedule. See you soon in the next set of sessions.